So we have two verses today to read. The first one will be Mark 12:29 through 31. This is part of the greatest commandment. So this one will be pretty common, and most of you guys have probably heard this one before. So Mark 12:29 through 31. The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, that the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love your Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second one is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And the second one is 2 Corinthians 13:5 through 6. And this one is probably less common. When I was reading it and kind of reviewing it, I went and read some commentary on it. It's from my interpretation of it was that the church was challenging Paul, whether he was truly a true believer or what his Christianity demonstrated. So this was kind of a little bit of a challenge back to the church. 2 Corinthians 13:5 through 6. Examine yourselves to see whether you are in faith. Test yourselves. Do you not realize that Christ Jesus is in you, unless, of course, you fail the test? And I trust that you will discover that we have not failed the test. I'd like to welcome Gerry Klopfenstein to preach today. Thank you for coming to our church, and looking forward to hearing you preach.
There was this daycare worker helping this little girl put on her clothes to go out to play. And the little girl looked at her and said, "Gee, you're tall." And the daycare worker looked at the little girl and said, "Well, someday you're going to grow up and be tall too." And the little girl said, "I'm not afraid." That's what my sermon's about. Not afraid to grow. But I really like that story. I want to start by stating some facts. We live in changing times. The world is in turmoil. Our country is divided. We don't know how to talk to each other. Our town isn't what it used to be. The church is losing influence. So, we live in a pandemic, both a physical and a moral pandemic. So the question is, how's that affecting me? This is the second serving because I preached this sermon a couple of weeks ago at Wayland. And when Lowell Unruh called me, I'd already been thinking, so it was easy to say yes. He called me just at a good time. But Michael asked me some weeks ago, have you been thinking about anything? And I said, I've been thinking a lot. And I've been thinking a lot for about 4 years. But I'm mainly thinking about myself. How's all this mess affecting my faith? How do I put the puzzle together? Do I know that Jesus lies within me? Jesus says, I am with you always. And if I don't believe that, then I've missed the good news altogether. So I've spent a lot of time looking at myself, and deep down, do I still believe that love wins? To be honest with you, it's been painful. It's been a lot of hard work. But if you're going to grow, you can't be afraid. And you need to look and do the hard work. It's easy to say, I check all the boxes and this is what I believe, but then when you have to live it, it's a whole lot different. So I've been stretched. And my goal is just to share with you what I've been thinking about in my personal journey, in my personal growth, and how I have dealt with the fear of growing. One thing in life I just hate are tests. Because they're examinations to see how much I've comprehended. Now in high school, I still remember those dreaded semester tests because I wasn't interested in math or science or biology. In fact, I wasn't interested in anything. And one thing for sure, I wasn't interested in thinking. And you know, the tests revealed it. But now that I'm older, my brain has grown, I have grown. I've learned this. It's not the questions that people ask you that count. It's the questions that you ask yourself. Why? Why do I believe this? Why do I react this way? Critical thinking is almost absent. In 2 Corinthians, Paul says, examine yourself. Do you not know that Christ indwells in you? Take the test. Are you still within the faith? Some of the hardest work a person can do is to look at themselves. It's a whole lot easier for me to examine you. The other day I was watching a lady, she was being interviewed on TV. She was a movie star. She had a leading role in a movie. And the commentator said, have you previewed your movie? And she says, no. I don't want to see myself. I'll see my imperfections. Well, the truth is we all play a role in life. We're all in a movie. Some of us have starring roles. And we're called to preview ourselves to see how you're doing. To see if we are really living out our faith. So my goal is to help us look at ourselves and ask the question, how do I look at myself? How do we, as a country, as a state, as a community, really look at ourselves. The starting point for me is at 76 years old, I asked myself, how do I see Jesus today? Not yesterday, not when I was 12 years old. How do I see him today? Now, I've always taken him seriously. I've been an exceptional good boy, you might say. I figured out I've spent between 9,000 and 10,000 hours in church, Sunday school, small group, book studies, conferences, conventions. And it all leads down to one question. What does Jesus want? Not what do you believe? What does Jesus want? If I've invested all this time and all my life as a follower, where in the world is he taking me? Now, as a small child in country school, I remember from kindergarten all the way through, every morning, we'd start with I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and then we'd say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on heaven as it is on earth. Give us this day our daily bread. And we'd ramble through that. If you take that through from kindergarten to 8th grade, that's a lot of times you're saying that prayer. It just became a routine. And really, it was much later in life, maybe in my 30s, maybe 40s even, I realized what I was asking for. And this second line of the prayer simply says what Jesus wants. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth like it is in heaven. That's the first thing he asked for, and it's the first thing he asked us to pray for. Now, is it possible that Jesus is more concerned about bringing heaven to earth than picking us all up and we escaping earth? Is that possible? Personally, I think I missed the mark. He's really concerned about heaven coming to earth. And he says to me, it's your responsibility to help me do that. It changes your perspective altogether because heaven is out there, but their job is right here. So then I asked myself, how in the world can I bring heaven to earth? How can I make that happen? 1 John says this, whoever claims to know him must walk like he walked. Now that is a tall order, and it's something you don't take lightly. If you choose to believe in him and ignore the walk, you don't believe in him. It means this, that I have to spend my life guided by a good moral compass. And there's lots of things that want to pull that compass off to the left just a little bit, or sacrifice this moral because the stock market's good, or sacrifice this moral. But you got to be guided by a good moral compass. And the first words of the Sermon on the Mount, blessed are the humble. And I've discovered this, without humility, we haven't got a chance. It's the first beatitude. Be poor in spirit. And it says this, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Tim McGraw, 5 years ago, wrote a country song called Be Humble and Kind. Always be humble and kind. I got that hanging in my living room wall. Always be humble and kind. Humility is such an elusive word, but it's what sets your compass. It means if you have humility, you will try to understand people who disagree with you. Always remembering there's another side and you might be wrong. It means people that you might have to sacrifice for because they haven't been near as fortunate as you, haven't been near as gifted as you, and they're down and out, and your taxes may be raised. It means that the different races and the cultures and religions all give you something that you can learn. But some of us won't even talk to a Muslim. It means helping everybody have daily bread. It means learning how to forgive because you know deep down you've messed up and you need forgiveness too. It means facing your fears to admit you're afraid. It definitely means recognizing your self-righteousness and you think Christians got a monopoly on God and it's your job to save the world. Because you got a special connection to God. It means you see your selfishness. What it really means is I got a full-time job. Setting my moral compass every day. Personally, I must constantly check my character to see if I'm in the faith. And see if I'm bringing heaven to earth. Now, another way to check my compass is this. Just look at the parables. You don't have to read from Genesis all the way to Exodus and through the New Testament. Read the parables. There are 55 parables in the gospel. They're just simply short stories, but what they will do is lead you deep into your inner self. And you'll discover what really lies deep within if you have the ability to think instead of being entertained by them. These parables require deep thought. Now there's a red needle on your compass. And for me, that red needle is simply Jesus' words. Not all the theories about Paul and everything else, just Jesus' words. And they will point you and me, if taken seriously, to a deeply moral life where people will see the kingdom of heaven on earth. Just a ray. The next way I check myself is this. Have I even heard the questions Jesus is asking? If you don't like tests, you don't like questions, so you ignore the questionnaire. But have you heard the questions Jesus asks? Years ago, my life was changed when I took a 32-hour course in mediation. I went to Des Moines, and I sat there, and I learned this. A mediator, what he does to help people who are in brokenness, he helps them learn how to listen to each other. He doesn't give an answer. He asks questions to the mistrusting parties. He says this, tell me how you feel. How does that make you feel? What did you hear said to the other party? What will it cost you if you continue on this path? Those are all deeply searching questions. And I learned that looking at oneself is very, very difficult, and that's why most people will avoid counseling. It's always the other person's fault. The Gospels have 308 questions in them. Jesus answered 3. Jesus was helping them to look at themselves. He's the mediator between God. The most convicting question in all of the Bible is at the end of the Good Samaritan story, when he was talking to this leader. And he ends up with this question. Who do you think the neighbor was? And the guy had to say, well, the one who gave mercy. But what makes that parable so interesting is the priest and the Levi, which is us, will never, ever be able to experience mercy from the Samaritan or the guy in the ditch, because they wrote him off. It's sad. And to ask this question, is it possible, because of fear, self-righteousness, and ignorance, I will never ever receive mercy from the people I've written off, or choose to ignore, or choose not to take seriously? That to me is deeply disturbing when I deal with it myself. And it makes me humble. How many people would be good neighbors if you just gave them a chance? I think Jesus may ask me this question. What will it cost you if you live so afraid? Another parable is simply the sheep and goats, Matthew 25. He asks about 5 questions real quick. Did you really care about the hungry? Did you give a cold drink to the thirsty? Did you clothe naked? Visit the sick? Take care of the widow? In this modern day, he might ask, did you build walls? The real question is, do I live a selfish life? And really, the only person that can answer that is you. Is the compass always being adjusted on the red print? Now, the last thing I do is maybe the hardest. Do I share Jesus' lament? Jesus lived in a very real world, just like us. The Roman Empire was as big as the United States. All the different people. There was poverty and injustice and brokenness and pain surrounded. Just think, Jesus had to deal with the king cutting off John the Baptist's head to please his wife. And John the Baptist was his beloved first cousin. How would you like to live in a world like that? Maybe we're closer than we think. Jesus constantly wished for the better angels in us to come out, and for our compasses to be set straight to bring in a kingdom. Now, in Luke, at the end of Jesus' life, we find him looking over Jerusalem, and he weeps. Do you know why he weeps? They don't understand the way of peace. After all this energy, he's still lamenting. And I wonder if he even wonders, have I wasted my life? He weeps because he wishes so much more for the better. Now, when our minds and our hearts are connected, really connected with Jesus, we will start to lament. But that lament is what empowers you and I to do what is right, even if it costs us. But I think the cost is simply sharing the burden of caring. And that means not just for us. It means people longing to do better. So really, if you got to know me really well, you'd know deep down inside me, I'm lamenting all the time. I lament greatly the spiritual ignorance of this country and the political divide. It hurts. I lament how much mistrust there is, and the word fake news was ever invented. I lament the truth is so hard to find, especially when everything hinges, is my 401k doing well? I lament how much fear we live in. Fear of the other. I lament, and I read in an article, what will destroy the church is cynicism, believing we're not really making a difference anyway. So why should I get involved? I lament that we don't know the way of peace. And yet we think we do. We're such a great country. We've been at war 280 years, almost constantly since we've been a nation. Very few years we haven't been. So, it could be very easy to become cynical. In fact, I talk to a lot of my Christian friends, and they admit they are. But for me, I quiet myself, and I reflect, and I think. I think about the path Jesus chose to walk. I think about how the Spirit of God worked in his life. I think about how he dreamed of a better world, and he was willing to pay the ultimate cost. I think about how he ministered for 3 years, helping people. Please look at yourself. Look at yourself. And come follow me. And I think of how he managed his disappointments, and he had plenty. But in the end, he stayed faithful. I watch how he chose to release God's Spirit the last few days of his life. That, to me, is how you bring in the kingdom of God. So in closing, I just simply say this thing. It takes an extreme amount of courage to grow. But I'm not afraid. Amen.